Take your Bibles and turn to 2 Samuel chapter 19. I know after we've had a wonderful week of revival meetings, revival services, and Brother Bill speaking for us oh no, it's just pastor now. So you'll just have to grin and bear it. But we're picking up where we left off 2 weeks ago. And David has been counted victorious. There's an argument between the 10 northern tribes and the 2 southern tribes as to who asked David to come back first. And so they fussed over that. And now we're seeing here in chapter 19 and verse 16, chapter 19, verse 16, there is some unfinished business to take care of. David is now about to be escorted back across the Jordan River. When he fled, he went across the Jordan to the east in Mahanaim. And that's where the battle, where all of the trees that were so thick, and that's the tree that caught Absalom by the head. And more people died because of the trees than because of the war itself. And now they're moving back from Mahanaim, back across the Jordan, to reestablish his kingdom in Jerusalem. The first people who invited him to come were the 10 northern tribes, although they weren't real happy with him, but they felt there would be more stability if he was in charge. And then Judah and Benjamin, they added their 2 cents worth and said, we'd like you to come back. And as they're going back, they come across some people that we've read about earlier. And do you remember a fellow by the name of Shimei? He liked to throw stones and curse, remember? Shimei, all the while David was fleeing from Jerusalem, he crossed the Jordan, and there's Shimei firing stones at him and cursing him because Shimei is of the lineage of Saul, and he did not appreciate him. Now we come back. It says, and Shimei, the son of Gera, a Benjamite, now remember Saul was of the tribe of Benjamin, which was a Bahurim, hasted and came down with the men of Judah to meet King David. Now if you had done what Shimei had done and thrown rocks at the king and cussed him out, would you plan on hearing he's coming and running down to meet him? It kind of gives us an insight into Shimei's thinking. If I hide, he'll look me up. If I go face him face to face, maybe I can get out of this. We're going to see what happens. And there were 1,000 men of Benjamin with him. Whoa. So you got 1,000 people of the same tribe as Saul, and Shimei, who has acted kind of poorly. And Ziba, now remember who Ziba was? Ziba was the servant of Mephibosheth. Mephibosheth was Saul's son. And Ziba, we'll go back and remember he said that Mephibosheth didn't come because he was hoping he was going to get control of the kingdom again. Well, we're going to find out that might not quite have been so. We'll see that in a second. Ziba, servant of the house of Saul, and his 15 sons and 20 servants with him, and they went over Jordan before the king. And there went over a ferry boat to carry over the king's household, and to do what he thought good. And Shimei, the son of Gera, fell down before the king as he was come over Jordan. And he said unto the king, Let not my lord impute iniquity unto me, neither do thou remember that which thy servant did perversely the day that my lord the king went out of Jerusalem, that the king should take it to his heart. Now, that language is Old English, and what he said is, please forget what I said, I didn't really mean it. That's in today's English. Please forget what I said. I didn't really mean it. But Abishai, verse 21, he says, here's why. For thy servant doth know that I have sinned. Therefore, behold, I am come the first this day of all the house of Joseph to go down to meet my lord the king. See how much I like you? See how sorry I am? We're going to see something in a little bit, but the next verse, Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, answered and said, Shall not Shimei be put to death for this, because he cursed the Lord's anointed? And here's what David does immediately. And David said, What have I to do with you, ye sons of Zeruiah, that ye should this day be adversaries unto me? Shall there any man be put to death this day in Israel? For do not I know that I am this day king over Israel? Therefore the king said unto Shimei, Thou shalt not die. And the king sware unto him. So David gives him, and we're going to see it here, a temporary reprieve. David promised, I'm not going to kill you. Now, if you'll take a little time out and go to 1 Kings chapter 2, which is pretty close now. 1 Kings chapter 2, next book over. 1 Kings chapter 2. And look at verses 8 and 9. 1 Kings 2, verse 8. And behold, okay, now David's about to die. And David is giving instructions to Solomon. And he says this, And behold, thou hast with thee Shimei the son of Gera, a Benjamite of Bahurim, which cursed me with a grievous curse in the day when I went down to Mahanaim. But he came down to meet me at Jordan, and I swear to him by the Lord, saying, I will not put thee to death with the sword. Now look at verse 9. Now therefore hold him not guiltless, for thou art a wise man, and knowest what thou oughtest to do unto him. But his hoar head, that's a gray hair, his gray head, his hoar head, bring thee thou down to the grave with blood. He kept his word. I'm not going to kill you. He just said to Solomon, don't let him get away with it. Because he read in Shimei's actions absolute insincerity. All he was out to save his neck. Does that ever happen in today's society? Does it happen with children? They have done, not just, there's a difference. When raising children, we need to understand that firm spanking discipline is to happen when there's been direct disobedience. That's how God deals. But when we do foolish stuff, do you realize that foolish stuff usually judges itself? Hey, look, Dad, I'm riding a bike with no hands. Look, Dad, no teeth. You don't have to spank them for doing stupid stuff. Stupid stuff is going to spank them themselves. But when there's direct disobedience, that has to be corrected. Because when direct disobedience is not corrected, you have trained them that direct disobedience is acceptable. And it's not. When you've given an order and they do not do it, there needs to be repercussions. Repercussions with love, repercussions with constant assurance that you love them, but repercussions that hurt. Because if we don't, we've trained them to think that God deals with it the same way, and I can sin with impunity. And all I got to do is cry and say, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. Well, Shimei found out that didn't work. Worked for a little while, didn't work. Okay? So now we'll go back and pick up. Now he's dealt with Shimei. Now he's got to deal with Mephibosheth and Ziba. Now, David was astute and wise enough to recognize Shimei's ploy. In this next case, we find being able to figure out who exactly is the liar is more difficult. And we're going to see how David deals with that. Mephibosheth, the son of Saul, came down to meet the king and had neither dressed his feet, nor trimmed his beard, nor washed his clothes from the day the king departed until the day he came again in peace. Now you got to remember, Mephibosheth is lame. Both legs are lame of some. His servant woman dropped him and messed up his feet, messed up his legs. And so he can't take care of himself real well. But for the entire time David was gone, according to what it says there, he just let himself go to pot. Didn't wash his clothes, didn't comb his hair, didn't cut his beard, didn't even trim his toenails, nothing. And this was to prove to David how sincerely he was a friend of David, even though he stayed in Jerusalem where Absalom set up his kingdom. And it looked like Mephibosheth was supporting Absalom, the enemy. And it came to pass, when he was come to Jerusalem, verse 25, to meet the king, that the king said unto him, Wherefore wentest thou not thou with me, Mephibosheth? So what's he say? Why didn't you come down with me? Because remember, what did Ziba tell David was the issue? Let's go back to chapter 16 and verse 3. And the king said, Where is thy master's son? In other words, where's Saul's son Mephibosheth? And Ziba said unto the king, Behold, he abideth at Jerusalem, for he said, Today shall the house of Israel restore me the kingdom of my father. Okay, now there's the story of Ziba. What story is Mephibosheth going to give here in chapter 19 and verse 26? And he answered, Mephibosheth answered, My lord, O king, my servant, who's his servant? Ziba, deceived me. For thy servant said, I will saddle me an ass, that I may ride thereon, and go to the king, because thy servant is lame. And he hath slandered thy servant unto my lord the king. But my lord the king is as an angel of God. Flattery, flattery, flattery. What do we do when we're being buttered up? Prepare to be fried. Do therefore what is good in thine eyes. Okay, now what's the dilemma David's got? He said, she said, or he said, he said. Ziba said, you said, good, David's gone, now maybe I get to be king. So what did David do when Ziba told him that? You remember what he did back in chapter 16? He gave all of Mephibosheth's belongings to who? To Ziba. All of the inheritance went to Ziba. Now, Mephibosheth there, and he hasn't combed his hair, he hasn't cut his beard, he hasn't trimmed his nails, he hasn't changed his clothes much. And now he's got to decide, what do I do? He doesn't know who's lying. How does he treat it? Let's take a look. For all my father's house were but dead men before my lord the king, yet didst thou not say, why speakest thou any more of thy matters? I have said, thou and Ziba, what's he going to do? You got to split it. If you're lying, you lost half of your inheritance. If he's lying, he lost half of his inheritance. It's as fair as he could get, right? It's as fair as a human can get. And God's going to take care of the rest. God's going to take care of the rest. Did both of them win? No. Both of them lost, didn't they? And now, does the king trust either of them? No. Really, the worst part of all this is not that I lost half of my inheritance, but I've lost the king's trust. Now, there's a couple other lessons here. Where did Mephibosheth meet King David? Right now. Aha. What was his excuse for not going with him? I'm lame. I asked for a mule to be readied for me, and he deceived me. Then how did he get to the Jordan? What's the lesson here? Do you realize never does an excuse cover our guilt? We can always do what we want to do. You know what I'm saying? We can always make an excuse for not doing what I don't really want to do, and still come off smelling like a rose when somebody says, well, why didn't you show up? Well, you know, I wanted to, but. And we make an excuse. And the excuse is, in this case, was the excuse understandable? I'm lame. I told him to go get my mule, and he just left. Was Ziba the only guy around that could get a mule for him? Evidently not, because somebody else got him a mule to go meet at the Jordan River. If you look at the map, Jerusalem is not 2 blocks away from the river. It's many miles away from the river. So David has some reasons to think perhaps Mephibosheth isn't quite genuine. But then he also has reasons to think perhaps Ziba isn't quite on the up and up, because Ziba's got a whole kingdom here now. So they both lost property, but they lost something much more valuable. their integrity. Folks, do you understand that your integrity, your reputation, your word is more valuable than anything else you've got? Your character, your integrity, your respectability, your believability, your availability, your faithfulness, your loyalty, all of those things got thrown away by a lie. I wasn't lying. I'm lame. But could you have followed me? Could you have gone with me? Yeah, but it would have been hard, and I would have had to go out of my way, and it would have been, and here's a key word, inconvenient. Folks, you're going to find out that if you're going to be faithful to God, your life will be inconvenienced on the human side. I mean, just think about coming to church on Sunday morning on a rainy day. You wake up in time to go, you look out the window, pull the covers over your head and roll over and start thinking, what excuse can I give, you know? And sadly, we can do that with church, but we would never even think that way for work, would we? Because work's not, church isn't mandatory in human eyes. It's not going to cost me my job if I don't go to church. But what does it cost us when we don't live up to God's expectation? And it better be God's expectation. I don't make the rules. You don't have to live up to it to me. But when we do this constant excusing rather than finding a way, we create a reputation, don't we? We create a picture of our character. The founder of the college that my wife and I went to school with had a quotation: "The test of your character is what it takes to stop you." The test of your character is what does it take to keep you from doing right? How hard does Satan have to work to get you to sin? For it is sin, because to him that knoweth to do good and doeth it not, James 4:17 says, to him that knoweth to do good and doeth it not, to him it is sin. Would it have been inconvenient for Mephibosheth to find somebody to help him get up onto a mule and ride with crippled legs all the way to where the king was? Yeah, it would have been inconvenient. It might have even been painful. It might have been to him's idea, life-threatening. But would it have been right? Yeah, it would have been right. And folks, doing right in a sin-cursed earth where Satan is the hometown hero will always cost the one doing right. Because you're swimming uphill or upstream. You're climbing uphill. You're going against the grain. You're going against cultural acceptance. You're going to stand out in the crowd. You're going to have a red suit when everybody else is wearing blue. Always. Why? Because it's inconvenient. You're going through a checkout line, and there's a lady checking your groceries. and you got your wallet out and you're doing all this, and, oh, I want to give her a tract, and it would be inconvenient to hold the line up. Now just go ahead and take the time and pull out a tract and hand it to her. But it's inconvenient. And then I don't know if they even want it. And they might throw it in my face, and I'd be so embarrassed. And yet, see, it's inconvenient. Now look at it on Ziba's side. It was just as inconvenient for Ziba. Perhaps Mephibosheth is telling the truth and said, you know, Ziba, if you want to be a faithful servant, if you want to wait on God to bless you for being a faithful servant, then get him the mule and get him up on it and help him to, you will be an all-star to Mephibosheth, helping him be what he ought to be and do what he ought to do. Oh, no, I see there's stuff in here for me. I'm going to go tell the king that Mephibosheth wanted to become king himself, and maybe I'll get something out of that. You see, doing right is a lot harder than doing wrong. Because doing wrong is like water going down a mountainside. It always follows the path of least resistance. Comes to a rock, goes around it. Finds a deep valley, right down in it. It's not going to go climbing any hills. And doing right, even in, you know, it's going to be inconvenient to raise a child successfully. You can't stick them in front of a television set and say, I hope it babysits them. It's an everyday staying on top of everything, consistent, faithful, loving, disciplining, encouraging, rewarding, and knowing when to do the different ones. All the time. All the time. Deb gave me an illustration of this just the other day. We have some friends in South Carolina who, when their first son was 2 or 3, they were in a grocery store together. And he wanted something, and she said no, and he whined, threw a fit. And she warned him and said, look, no, you do not throw a fit because you didn't get your own way. And he kept on whining and throwing a fit. He says, got right in his face, says, look, I'm not going to give it to you, and I can't spank you here in the church or in the store. But when we get home, you're going to get a spanking. And one of the things that Deb had taught this lady and the children, Deb always teaches the children in her class, happy heart, happy face. Happy heart, happy face. Happy heart, happy face. And so this lady said to her son, I want you to have a happy heart and a happy face. And he threw a fit. Threw a fit. And she said, look, you're going to have to get a spanking when we get home. And they went on through, checked out the groceries, got in the car, and he's sitting in the back of the van, and he says, Mommy! Yes? I have a happy heart. And she says, I'm so glad that you have a happy heart, but you're still going to get a spanking when we get home. And when they got home, she took him in the room, said, now, I love you, but you directly disobeyed me, and you're going to have to get spanked. And he got spanked, and he cried, and she held him and says, I still love you, and you can still have a happy heart and a happy face, but you were wrong, and you sinned. Now, this kid's not even old enough to get saved yet, doesn't even understand all, but he knows how to learn to obey, and he knows how to learn to disobey. Happy heart, happy face. And the next time he goes to the store, do you think he's going to remember that? Oh, yeah. And if you let him get away with it the next time, now you've confused the daylights out of him. Now, why do I say that? Just a couple of parents. Folks, that's the way God works with you, and you have better understand it. You better recognize it. Sometimes rotten stuff happens to you because you don't have a happy heart and a happy face, and God's saying, I'm going to spank you when you get home. And you don't learn. You repeat it over and over and over. And it's like that saying, about history. If we do not learn from history, we are doomed to what? Repeat it again. Well, if the child doesn't learn, but guess what? We as Christians, if we don't learn from Mephibosheth, it's going to happen to us. What are you going to excuse? You can always find a way to do what you want to do. But do you even look for a way to do what you're supposed to do? Not because pastor said to do it, but because God said to do it. Mephibosheth didn't go out of his way to follow him. Ziba didn't go out of his way to be a loyal servant, and they both lost half the inheritance. Now we'll move on to Barzillai. Look at verse 31. And Barzillai, the Gileadite, came down from Rogelim and went over Jordan with the king to conduct him over Jordan. Now, who was Barzillai? Do you remember? Somebody gathered all kinds of food and all kinds of stuff to feed the humongous army. And Mephibosheth said unto the king, Yea, let him take all, for as much as my lord the king is come again in peace unto his own house. He was trying to gain favor, the favor that he lost. Because remember, what had already David given Mephibosheth before all this happened? He said, okay, everything that was Saul's is yours, and you get to come and eat in my palace. You have nothing to worry about. I will provide all of your comforts and all of your needs as long as I'm king. He didn't take that away from him. He just took half of the kingdom away from him. But David still, Mephibosheth isn't costing himself anything. What can Mephibosheth do with an entire inheritance that he has no legs to do anything with? So he wasn't really offering much. He was actually trying to gain favor in David's sight. Appreciate you bringing that up. But now, who was Barzillai? He was the one, and remember, he was a Gileadite. He's not even an Israelite. He's not even any of the tribes. He was one who recognized David as God's man and honored him and served him. And he brought out all that food for all of the armies. And now he is even now left home, and he is conducting David safely across the Jordan. And it says here, now Barzillai was a very aged man, 80 years old, 80 years. A score is 20. 4 times 20 is 80. That's why, if you remember, we are given, according to the book of Psalms, 70, and if by reason of strength, 80 years. So 70 is 70. Reason of strength, 80. If you're at 70 and above, we're on borrowed time. If you're at 80 above, you're hanging by a thread. We're getting close. Okay, 80 years old, and he had provided the king of sustenance while he lay at Mahanaim, for he was a very great man. And the king said unto Barzillai, Come thou over with me, and I will feed thee with me in Jerusalem. Now let's stop for a second. One of the things that we learn about generosity. In the New Testament, Jesus is standing there watching the people give their offerings. And who did he commend? He commended the widow and her 2 mites. Just 2 mites. Why did he commend her? She gave all she had. Percentage-wise, she gave more than all of those rich guys ever gave. But look how he commends Barzillai. This is forever settled in heaven. This verse about Barzillai will be eternal. He was a great man, and he gave a lot away. How many great men are there that do that? What's even worse is how many great men are there that do that by giving it to God? Oh, we've got a lot of philanthropists that build zoos with their name on it, and build schools with their name on it, and build buildings in Washington with their name on it. But how many send missionaries all over the world? And they are the only supporter of that missionary. Person that most of you would recognize his name if I told you, passed away about 2 years ago. There were over 100 missionaries, many of them in India, that he supported every single month. He was very rich. But he didn't leave a lot of it to the family. He sent it ahead by supporting missionaries. R.G. Letourneau was a believer. R.G. Letourneau was the big earth-moving company. You ever seen a Letourneau Westinghouse earth mover? They build highways and freeways and bridges. He tithed 90% and lived on 10% of his income. Barzillai, God commended a great aged man who was rich because he used his riches for God's cause. We need to think about, who does God commend, and why does he commend them when it's dealing with their finances? And the king said unto Barzillai, come thou over with me, and I'll feed thee in Jerusalem. And now look, he just spent all this time, all this money, all this food of his greatness, feeding his armies. And what's David going to do? I'm going to give it back to you now. I'm going to Jerusalem. You come with me and I'll feed you. Watch what I put on your table. But what does Barzillai say? And Barzillai said unto the king, how long have I to live that I should go up with the king unto Jerusalem? We need to understand that there is a humility that unsaved people have no clue about. There's a meekness. I don't need attention. I don't need to be put up on a pedestal. I don't need to go and sit next to the king at his dinner table. I'm about to die, and I want to be back home with the people who mean a lot to me. I don't need this kind of stuff. Why should I go up with the king to Jerusalem? I'm this day 80 years old, and I can discern between good and evil. Can thy servant taste what I eat, or what I drink? Can I hear any more the voice of singing men and singing women? Wherefore then should thy servant be yet a burden unto my lord the king? No. I'm too old. Thy servant will go a little way over Jordan with the king, and why should the king recompense it to me with such a reward? You realize what he just said? I didn't feed your army. I didn't take care of you. I didn't befriend you to advance me. So I'll go a little ways with you, and then I'm going home where I can die in peace. I wonder how many of us would say, oh man, finally, my ship came in. People are going to know that I'm important. Not Barzillai. Not Barzillai. That's not what we're living for, folks. Our reward is eternal, not temporal. Eternal, not temporal. And the king answered, oh, wait a minute, here it is. Let thy servant, I pray thee, turn back again, that I may die in mine own city, and be buried by the grave of my father and of my mother. But behold thy servant Kimham. Let him go over with my lord the king, and do to him what shall seem good unto thee. Many believe that Kimham was Barzillai's son. He said, give it to somebody that can enjoy it. I don't want it. Let Kimham. If it was his servant, that's even greater. But many believe it was his son. He says, you want to give something, you want to honor somebody in my name? That's fine, but I don't need what you want me to get. He sent it along. And the king answered, Kimham shall go over with me, and I will do to him that which shall seem good unto thee, and whatsoever thou shalt require of me, that will I do for thee. And all the people went over Jordan, and when the king was come over, the king kissed Barzillai and blessed him, and he returned unto his own place. Then the king went on to Gilgal, and Kimham went on with him, and all the people of Judah conducted the king, and also half the people of Israel. All of Judah, half of Israel, that's the half of the 10 tribes. And behold, all the men of Israel came to the king, and said unto the men of Judah, said unto the king, why have our brethren the men of Judah stolen thee away, and have brought the king and his household and all David's men with him over Jordan? A big argument, a big brouhaha between the 10 tribes and the 2 tribes. And the 10 tribes said, what are you doing putting him in Jerusalem, and why don't we get him up there where we are? We're the ones that asked for him to come home before you did. And then what did Judah say back? Well, verse 11, and all the men of Judah answered the men of Israel, because the king's near kin to us. He's our brother. He's out of Judah. Wherefore then be ye angry for this matter? Have we eaten at all the king's cost, or hath he given us any gift? And the men of Israel answered the men of Judah and said, we have 10 parts in the king. And others said, we're bigger than you are. Does it sound like 2 boys fighting? We're bigger than you. I said it first. I claimed it. I called it. Does that ever happen in your family? Well, what's this all about? Why do we have this here? This is the groundwork. 40-some years before Solomon dies. Because Solomon becomes the next king, and they're still united under Solomon. But the groundwork was laid. 10 against 2, 10 against 2. Rehoboam, Jeroboam, Rehoboam, Jeroboam. And this is the beginning of the fracture. Do you realize that the lesson here is you can avoid great destruction if you'll humble yourself when the first sign of trouble happens? But neither side was going to humble. We're going to win. And what did they win? Well, the 10 tribes lost their identity completely, were scattered to the winds. The 2 tribes, Judah and Benjamin, were taken out for 70 years, then brought back. And in 1948, they established the kingdom again at Jerusalem. But they lost their identity. Matter of fact, they lost their identity to the point that they became the arch enemy of Germany. And they brought it on themselves because they could not and would not live in peace. Does that give us an understanding of why in the book of Ephesians that we've just studied, and we're still studying, but remember the first walk was the walk of unity? You want to destroy a church? Demand to be right and get your own way with no humility, with no love. By this shall all men know that you're my disciples, if you love one another. Not a lot of love between the 10 northern tribes and the 2 southern tribes, and it destroyed the nation. And because it destroyed the nation, it was God's will that we be saved, because if they hadn't practiced John 1:11, he came to his own, and his own what? Received him not. But to as many as received him, to them gave he power to become the sons of God, even to them that believe on his name, including the Jews and the Gentiles, which we've studied in Ephesians. So they fought it out. Judah and Benjamin, he's our king, we claim him. Fierce words that resulted in a divided kingdom after Solomon's death. So we'll pick up with chapter 20 next time. Father, we pray your blessing. Help us to learn these lessons. Consistent, faithful, meek, humble, inconvenient love that'll glorify your name. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.